ego gets in the way every step along the way. You're pointing the finger at somebody else, where you're pointing 3 fingers right back at yourself. When you're blaming clients for things or blaming staff, that is definitely where ego's getting in the way.
Let's do this.
May I have your attention, please?
Welcome to Accounting High. It's freshman year at a brand new school. Here, we have no rules in place as we're on a mission to set our own traditions with some of the best teachers in the accounting industry. Whether you loved high school or you hated it, here's your chance to be a part of an unforgettable experience redone. While you're here, don't forget to follow us on Spotify or subscribe on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss out on any new episodes. And feel free to leave us a 5-star review letting us know how the school year is treating you. Here is this morning's announcements read by me, Alex Miles, your friendly office administrator here at Accounting High. Let's do this. ×2, because it's our second morning announcement recording. Action.
May I have your attention, please?
Greetings, Accounting High. Alex Miles here, your friendly office administrator, ready to read this morning's announcements. Imagine this. You're in elementary school and the book fair is in town. You flip through the catalog and circle all of the books so you can beg your parents to send you to school with some money. Remember that feeling when you finally got your hands on a book that all of your friends had? Almost as if you hit a gold mine that you just wanted everybody else to know about too? Well, you can expect to feel those same feelings after you listen to Fresh Book Report episodes like the one coming up. And 2 lucky winners that share this episode on social media and tag us at Accounting High will receive this month's book from us. In today's Fresh Book Report, Scott and Twyla talk all about Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. Except this time, Twyla is Scott's student as he gives her the lowdown on what this book is all about. We get a glimpse into how our ego can get in the way of a lot of our potential successes. Ryan Holiday takes a unique approach to explain how often our problems are caused not by external factors, but from our own ego by breaking it up into 3 parts: aspire, success, and failure. Thanks for spending this time with us. We really do hope this book becomes one that you put on your book fair wish list. So sit back, relax, and open your mind because class is in session.
I repeat, may I have your attention, please?
This is another public service announcement brought to you in part
By Accounting High. Welcome to Fresh Book Reports, where we discuss books and topics that bridge the gap between mental, physical, and emotional health for you, the modern accounting professional.
Anything else?
Yeah.
So without further ado, introducing the star of our show,
Scott Scarano and Twyla Verhelst.
we're gonna have a problem here.
Today's book I've titled a palate cleanser, or a segue between our 2 books that we're both reading. This is a book that I've read that I want to share. I think it's a great segue and a bridge between both books because there's a lot of similar universal principles, theories, truths that we're tapping into. What it means to be human, a human with a purpose. What is this book that we're doing today?
I feel like I'm like a sponsored ad here all of a sudden.
And now a word from our sponsor.
This book is Ego is the Enemy.
Ego is the enemy. And the author has this tattooed on his arm. Ego is the enemy. It's that important to him. Ryan Holiday. I have a series of his books. I absolutely love it. But this one in particular, I thought hit me at a good time in life. The ego is the enemy. I mean, that says it all. But you said you read a couple summaries of it. Give me your take initially of what this is.
Let me share with you what I know about the book so far, having not read it and intentionally didn't read anything beyond the summaries, knowing that we would do this style where you share with myself and the audience what you learned from this book and your takeaways. But what I heard so far from the summaries is that this is about your biggest enemy being yourself, and that you're more likely to be what gets in the way than anything else. And that in some cases, there's examples throughout the book of CEOs that they've either learned this lesson or they didn't learn this lesson, and the results or the impact that they had actually kind of stems back to the fact that they were in their own way, whether that was in their head or thinking that they knew everything already and that they didn't have more to learn, and that got in the way. So that becomes the barrier to growth, to success, to hitting the goals and the achievements that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, we are our own barriers. We get in our own ways in business and in life. And a lot of the times, if you can identify that and frame it the right way, then you can learn from it. And we're always learning, continually learning. A lot of good P words in this book too, and he's intentional about all of it. He's not as upfront or in your face as me and Nicole are, but he talks about patience, poise, and purpose. Not having passion, and I'll get into that, but I think our society in general, we promote a lot of ego boosters to where we're worried that people are depressed. We're worried that they have low self-worth. There's a lot of things that we do to help push somebody's ego. And I think that there has to be that healthy balance of understanding. I think early days for somebody that still has a lot to learn, I think you do need some ego boosts. It's good to be proud of stuff, but pride is the enemy, is what he says in this book. It's good to be passionate about something that you want to do, that you love to do, but passion without purpose is empty and it doesn't lead to success. So there's a lot of things that we promote. You know, I'm noticing I'm using only P words, the things that I'm talking about here. But there's a lot of things that we promote that as you dive deeper, they are good in and of itself, but they're not the reason. And they are things that we should be mindful of. So let's get into it. First, let's lay this out. Ego is the enemy, the unhealthy belief in our own importance. That's how he defines ego. Breaks it out into 3 components: aspire, success, and failure. And in each of those phases, ego is the enemy. Aspire, early phases. Success, after you've reached the peak or you can see the peak. And then inevitable failures for anybody. And all the ways that ego plays in to really corrupt the mind and your path forward. The reason I say this is a bridge book is because in all aspects of this, he really taps into the process, the scorecard, the things that you can do to get out of your own head, to get out of your own way. And a lot of that taps into the fundamentals of Atomic Habits. So I'm going to probably relay that in as I'm talking about this book, because I saw a lot of similarities and also a ton of similarities in our future book that we're going to do, Infinite Game. We're both in the middle of reading it again, and I get more out of it the second time, like I said, for Atomic Habits. That's going to be a great one. Stay tuned. So, first phase, aspire. I link in this to the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Have you ever seen that, or have I ever mentioned it? It's a little chart that's like, gives you the phases of growth, I guess. I don't even know what it's displaying, but in the early stages, you're at the peak of Mount Stupid with extra confidence, thinking you know everything, not listening to anybody because you know it all. Then as you learn more, you realize you're in this valley of despair, or that's what they labeled the downside of that. And you know that you don't know anything, but yet you lose all confidence and you have no faith that you can even get there. Then you're at this rise of plateau of sustainability. I think in the early stages, aspire reminded me of the peak of Mount Stupid, right? So he talks about becoming a student and learning and not being too passionate about things and having purpose over passion, getting out of your own head, losing touch with reality. I think that happens to a lot of people that are really trying to build something or do something, is they lose touch with the reality of things because they get really tunneled in. I can definitely relate to that. As I started building up this podcast, in my head, it was so much different than it really was. And I finally released something. We only had like 5 listeners. There was no reality in what I thought it would be. So I was kind of stuck there. And then he talks about pride and how a lot of people will start looking down on things because they're so prideful of what they've done and they're not seeing what's in front of them or not seeing what's above them. And one of the cures to all 3 of these phases is finding someone else. So he brings in a quote from Frank Shamrock, which was a UFC fighter, but he said something very prophetic. It's great. There's a quote in there, but I use this for each phase. So you need to find your plus, minus, and equals in life and business. I liken this to running an accounting firm and what I've done in my journey, and that's community, finding your plus, minus, and equals. So your plus is somebody that is better than you, that you can learn from. So your mentor. Minus is somebody lesser that you can teach to be a mentor to someone else. And then you need somebody equal to run with, to challenge themselves and you, that are basically at your level. And it, again, like at each stage is different phases. So when you're in that aspire phase where you're getting in your own way and you're getting in your own head, you need somebody that could bring you back to reality, that can coach you, that can help you, that can mentor. So finding a coach, that is a way. I mean, anything that can get you out of your own head and get out of your own ego, out of your own way, is going to help. So always finding people and needing that help. I think a lot of us get into the trouble of being too self-sufficient and not delegating and thinking that we can do everything ourselves, thinking that we have these superpowers, especially in a firm. I've done this myself, and you can make a lot of money doing that, but you're not going to be happy, and you're going to be working endless hours, crazy amounts of work, trying to keep everybody else happy because you have all the answers and you know how to do everything. So finding somebody that can help coach you, that has already gotten past that. What are your initial reactions to some of this?
Well, first, I love the plus, minus, equals that you shared, because I think that that's an important part of community, is that you do have somebody that's walked even a half step before you to learn from. The value in having somebody who is maybe a half step or more behind you and what you can share with them. Not only is that giving back, but it actually reinforces what you already know and what you've already learned. And they say that one of the best ways to reinforce your knowledge is to teach it. Mm-hmm. And that becomes that piece of it. Somebody that's also right where you're at. I love thinking about that, because that's your peer group that you can really lean into in terms of having that safe space to land. There's less likely to be some ego in play there, because you are at the same, you're not trying to like keep up with somebody. You're not trying to showcase to somebody something that they can learn from. Instead, it's that equal ground. So I really love that. I'm curious to know, I think I mentioned this right before we started recording, is does the author speak at all about the differences between men and women and where they spend time on this? What did you call it? The peak of stupid?
No, he doesn't distinguish, but he brings a lot of examples. So the book is told definitely differently than, and I'm starting to see the structure of some of these books that we're reading. This one is a lot of theory and stories as concrete examples and people. A lot of women in the examples. Well, one of the bits that I just read in the failure phase, which we haven't got there, was Katharine Graham, who was just a mother of 3. She was somebody that was thrust into a position that she wasn't equipped to handle. And because she sought out a lot of help and assistance, she got better and grew into her own. Angela Merkel is another one that he brings up. That was a prime example of somebody that has no ego, that has went her whole life not doing the typical things that you would see leaders do. She's the head of Germany. I honestly didn't see the gender, because that doesn't jump out to me like it does to you. And so that would be important to bring up. And that's why you're the balancing act on a lot of these things. So,
well, I think for even myself, I go into this spot of times when I can think of myself, whether you call it ego or not, things that have prevented me from starting. And I'm sure a lot of people and women can relate to this, where you almost feel like I don't even have the ability, or I don't have the knowledge, or I don't have the experience, and you don't even start something, and that gets in the way. But I'll be honest to say that there's other times when I have learned the hard way that I was getting in the way, that I did have an ego, and I thought, I've got this figured out and I don't need to learn more or be absorbing more or connecting with people who are also on this trajectory because I'm 10, 20 steps ahead of them. Mm-hmm. And that blocked my learning and my growth or the impact that I had. So I think there's both there. I think sometimes I see more so women become non-starters because they don't have the confidence or don't believe that they're good enough, or all these things that people and women are good at creating barriers to even just getting something started or taking something to the next level. And in other cases where you almost get the traction and then you get this confidence, and if you're not careful, it takes you too far. And that then becomes a different barrier than the non-starter barrier.
That's really good that you brought that up, because that's the difference between even getting into the phase where ego becomes the enemy. Because if you have zero ego is great, but meek is the example that I would use. People who feel like they are lesser, and then society has made them feel that way, where they don't even have the confidence to need to be humble. They don't have that overconfidence to be in that aspire phase, that initial growth phase where they can't even get there. That's where they need the encouragement. They need the passion. They need that self-esteem boost. They need that ego injection almost to get there. And then you need to take it away. That's where you've got the balance, because then it becomes the enemy once you have too much of it.
Right.
I think the biggest thing there is also like entitlements and understanding what I was given being a white male, that I was able to get to the phases of aspire and success easily. Have the humility and the understanding to know that it wasn't me that got me there. It was my privilege, how I was born with and what I was handed. And that's something that definitely comes up again and again for me, and how I'm humbled to know that I was born into a society that made it easier for me, made a lot of things easier for me, allowed me to make a lot of mistakes and have a lot of failures only because I was able to succeed in the first place. And that's a really important distinguishing factor of why I was drawn to this book to begin with. I need to knock myself down a few pegs in all phases along the way. So this leads pretty good into success and how ego is the enemy of success too. In that phase where we've made it to the top of the mountain and we feel like we could stop learning. This is also where we lose grasp on our habits and the processes that got us there in the first place. So any of those phases along the way of atomic habits, building the right habits to become successful, once you taste that success, you feel like you may know it all and you don't need to do a lot of those fundamentals anymore. That's going to lead to failure. We can get to the failure phase, but it's very important to keep a strong hold on the fundamentals that got us there. That checklist that I'm keeping up with every day. I'm reminded every day too, if I miss a day on that I wouldn't feel as good as I do now, and I wouldn't have a sobering touch with reality if I wasn't keeping up with those very small things. So that's very important. Always be a student, regardless of where we are. This is the plus phase. This is where I link in the plus part of that, where we need somebody that still is better than us. We need that more so when we succeed than when we're aspiring. And not use that as a way to be envious, but to see them as a worthy rival. That's what they talk about in Infinite Game. We'll get to defining that phrase. Stay tuned. But somebody that you can aspire to still, even after success. There's always going to be somebody better than us. And I think tapping into that, it's important to identify that person and seek out the help. There is plenty of people out there that can help us succeed in running a better firm. I've done this plenty of times and I'm still doing it always. It's not good. It's not healthy to surround yourself with people that you're just mentoring, because then you hit a ceiling. I felt like I did that with the Paget folks, people that I definitely was helping. I was definitely helping them along their way, but I also felt like I knew it all. And I felt like I didn't have to really learn anymore because I've done this. That really got in my way for a number of years. So sobriety, open-mindedness, organization, and purpose, that stabilizes us along that journey. As we get toward the top, you want to get stabilized. You want to be grounded or buoyant, not get too stuck on the highs, and then as we get into failure, not get too stuck on the lows. Facts are better than fables is something I wrote there. Understanding the facts of our situation and not the story that we tell ourselves on how we got there. And that's a sobering moment to understand that for some people, it was because of their privilege, because of the way that they look, it got them to where they are, the way that they were born, and their gender too. So understanding what's the priority, what's important. And again, he talks about entitlements, control, and paranoia are things that definitely get in our way, and definitely ego is in the way there. The belief in our own importance. That's basically the definition of ego. Managing ourselves, managing our great qualities, doing all of that and keeping up with our habits. So beware of the disease of me. That's something that Pat Riley says, the ex-coach of the Lakers. He had to deal with a lot of egos in his day. He's got a lot of insight in there. He talks about a lot of good coaches and CEOs. This was the issue with Jobs. Jobs learned from it. You know, he got fired from Apple. He definitely got in his own way. He definitely talks about people like Steve Jobs or Kanye West that have these swollen egos that got in their way. Kanye West is still dealing with it. I think he's a musical genius, but he gets in his own fucking way every step along the way. Steve Jobs did learn from it, but ultimately Steve Jobs died because of his ego, because he thought he could beat cancer. He thought he could eat his way out of it by eating fruit. He would probably still be alive today if his ego didn't get in the way. He definitely got his own way, but he'd also proven a lot of these phases and how ego can get in your way, but also you can get past that by being grounded. Like I've always said, my feet are on the ground, but my head's in the clouds, and I live somewhere in the middle of there.
I just want to even pause you just for a moment, because there's a couple of things. You keep sharing some golden nuggets that I want to touch on, but
yeah, you got to stop me because I'll just keep going.
I think we spoke about this last time with the other book, was around awareness. And what I'm hearing loud and clear between your words and your sentences is there's a lot of awareness and intention required to keep somebody in a spot of that ego not getting in the way, that they don't become a barrier to themselves. And I would suspect that human nature would, there'd be times when we veer off course, whether that's with habits, we talked about that last time, or with veering off course with, I got this figured out, and have these Kanye West moments of having a big head or saying something that's not going to serve ourselves or our team or where we're going, and that we get in our way. And I think the biggest thing is we probably will all veer off track, but how do we become aware to bring ourselves back to it? Because even those people that you noted, the females specifically, you're talking about how they had success and that they didn't allow ego to get in their way. I suspect they had moments that it did. And one of the things that I'm hearing a lot in the accounting profession with respect to growth isn't so much that people feel like they know everything, but more so that they're trying to scale their team and grow and delegate so that they're not like the epicenter of everything that happens inside of their firm. And it just got me thinking about, is there some ego at play there? Because if I go back to my firm days, I'll humbly say there was, in terms of, I'm the only one who can do this. And I'm the one who can do this best. Can somebody else actually do it it's not you doing it, but they do it well enough that it still keeps going, and now it's not you doing it. So I think there's potentially even some ego in there that isn't necessarily recognized by firm owners or accountants as ego, but that could be part of what's preventing them from the growth of their firm or delegating to their team.
Yeah. I think if you take any part along the way, you can probably draw direct line to where ego is probably getting in the way. And it's just framing those things and understanding them and being self-aware of them to know how to improve. Because if something's getting in your way, usually it's yourself. You could be pointing the finger at everybody, and that's absolutely where you need to point the finger at yourself. I've said that a lot too. And there's a quote where it's like you're pointing the finger at somebody else, where you're pointing 3 fingers right back at yourself. And that's when you're blaming clients for things or blaming staff. That is definitely where ego's getting in the way. And he talks about self-awareness, and he talks about, you basically captured it before I even got to that phase. It's the enemy of what came before and what's happening now and what's coming next. Ego gets in the way every step along the way. Don't be decided by others. Don't be decided by yourself either. Don't let others define who you are, and be careful not to define yourself in a vacuum without the input of others, without that. It says a monk is separate from all and in harmony with all at the same time. So meditate on that one.
Yeah, I was literally just looking up and thinking about, like, so a monk, say it again for me.
A monk is separate by all and in harmony with all at the same time. Separate from all and in harmony with all at the same time. And all could mean environment, the earth, the people, everything. It's removing the ego out of that equation and becoming one with all. All and all, get I out of the equation and become a we. Maybe that's a new pronoun. And maybe that is one. They. Is that part of the pronoun thing that's happening now?
Yep.
So they is gender neutral?
That's right. Yeah. But it's not quite the intention that you're talking about now in terms of...
I know it's not, but that's why I'm drawing the correlation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the phrases that you hear often is that there's no I in team, meaning like to take I out of it or myself out of it and instead think of it as us.
But is that what they comes from, or is that something different altogether too?
Different altogether is my understanding. You're asking the white girl, though, that isn't part of that group of individuals that wants to be identified as they. So probably a richer, deeper discussion. But us, I believe, is us. And that's collaborative, everyone, inclusive of all, right? That's how I think of us.
And it's important to frame all these things the right way. I think that's what all the pronouns are, is just creating the right frame of reference for things and not to be clouded by past misunderstandings or thought patterns to get past that. And that's where I'm trying to create new thought patterns, especially with lessons that are in this book. So failure, all along the way, we're all going to experience a lot of failure. And the point of this is that ego really gets in the way of failure because we're so defined by our successes. So for somebody that has experienced a lot of success, once they get that setback, it becomes the end of the world for them. They're very external about it, and they're blaming all other circumstances. They're pointing at everybody else, and they're so defined by their successes that they can't even define themselves when they fail. It becomes the death of them in a lot of cases. If Jobs let this get in the way, then he wouldn't have come back to Apple and succeeded too. So I think this is where things started changing, and he started framing this. He does talk about that in this phase of the book. It talks about a lot of the setbacks, and ego makes us unprepared for the losses and the falls that we inevitably are going to experience. That's an increased self-awareness. Helps with that. This plays right into the infinite game too, because for somebody that has an infinite mindset, it's not about a short-term win or a loss. They know and they get excited when they lose or when there's a setback. Setbacks make them happy. Let's tackle this. Let's figure out a way around this and make everything stronger, make everything better. So it's almost anticipated. And that infinite mindset is a very communal mindset too, because you know you need others to help you get beyond that setback. That finite mindset is, I got us here. I can get us out. I'll figure it out. Usually it spirals downward and it continues to spiral. Purpose, poise, and patience is what he talks about in this phase as well. Not pity and not passion. So the truth cannot be hidden as well. This is a lot of times where the truth comes out during failures. And as you're trying to tell yourself the story about why you succeeded, and then the truth eventually comes out. The truth, in this case, for a lot of people, it doesn't set them free. It destroys them if they're so tied to the story that they told themselves on what success meant or how they succeeded. Then it's a grounding reality. And sometimes it takes failure for people to get it and to get there. You can't hide the truth.
I want to just ask something about the failure spot, because when I think about failure, I think of in the moment of failure or what feels like failure. because I agree with where we're going with the infinite game, that we shouldn't even necessarily frame it as failure, more so as part of the game or part of the journey. But when I think about something that feels like failure, that's probably pulling in a bit of the Brene Brown book that we'll do later. But there's, this happened because of you, meaning like you being the general, like it wasn't me, it was somebody else that caused this failure. The flip side of the second one of being, this happened because of me. And then this can even revert us back to the non-starters of, I knew I shouldn't have done this. I knew I wasn't good enough to try this. I knew that I wouldn't be successful at this. So it's like me and comes back to me. Or the third one being, why did this happen? And what are my takeaways from this? And I like to think of this as what so. So when you talked about the stories, stripping away the stories, I think of what so, meaning what actually happened. Because sometimes we have, well, he or she did this, and that's what happened. The client, the person that left on your team, whatever, your spouse. Or there's the, I knew I shouldn't have. And that you start to say, I'm terrible at doing this. I suck at that. I don't have these skills. Even it can go in so far as I'm a terrible person. I never succeed at anything. Like, is that what so? You start telling a lot of stories to yourself in that second scenario. Or you can get to the truth moments of, here's what actually happened. And I like even doing that in success moments, because you could take that to what happened in success. Well, I was successful because you did something. Or I was successful because this is where ego can get in the way. I'm good at everything and I don't have anything more to learn. I can hang out here now and I'll continue to be successful because I've got this. Or the third being, well, what actually brought me to this moment? And this is where Atomic Habits comes in of like,
Yes.
What did you do to get there? And who supported you in this?
Blame the process.
Or look back on the process and know that in Atomic Habits, he talks about no success is the result of something that happened that didn't lead you there. It's not an overnight success, even though it often looks like it. And so what happened to bring me to this moment of a success, and how am I going to take my learnings of what brought me here to get me to there? And so in both cases, you can use those three types of, I have three choices right now. I can blame somebody else. I can let ego, or in some cases, my lack of ego, impact it, or I can actually analyze what happened and how I'm going to either learn from that and make a different result, or learn from that and have a bigger impact.
I love that. That is almost exactly the next line that I was about to go over. You did it. Like, you nailed it right at the pinnacle. So and that's tying into Atomic Habits again with the after action review type, where it's what went well, what didn't go well, and what can you improve, and reflecting on that and maintaining your own scorecard of the process and what parts of the process need to change. So it's not one person, and that one person is not you or somebody else. It's not an external force that caused you to fail or to succeed. It was parts of the process along the way that inevitably is going to lead to both successes and failures, because as you continue to reflect and learn, and Ron Baker talks about after action reviews a lot in framing of like projects and pricing and ways to not have to focus on time. But those after action reviews provide us with learning points and ways to improve moving forward. Finding joys in the processes is very stabilizing and sobering, and wins and losses won't consume you. You're going to have a lot more consistency. And I think that ties into both Atomic Habits and Infinite Game very well. And that's why this book is a great segue or bridge between the two. It's learning that it's not us and it's not somebody else, but it's the processes that we've picked up along the way. And it's a lot of different pieces, but being very sober in all of that and understanding that you can't get too high on the wins and you can't get too low on the losses, but staying buoyant, staying in the middle there is detaching ourselves, from our egos, and not getting in the way. So having somebody else to ground you, that's what the plus, the minus, and the equals are. They're all grounding cables to ground us to somebody else that understands our experience, or we understand theirs, or is going through the same thing. I feel like that's what Nick's tips are. That's what this is. People that are basically learning with each other, and the listeners too. The listeners could be learning or could have something to share. So if you have any books that you want to suggest, or you have any other suggestions for us or comments, leave them to us directly, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, wherever we're at. We'd love to hear back from you. I think this is a great book, great way to get your head back in the game, whatever game you're playing, whether it's the infinite or just the game of life. Get back in the game and understand that you need others to help get you there, especially if you're a self-driven person. Look at the solo firms out there and pair up with some others. You don't have to partner your firm, but pair up with some others. You have a buddy that you can go to, a resource that you can go to. If you feel like you can do it all yourself, you're in for a rude awakening at some point, and everything's going to come crashing down, and nobody's going to be there to help you if you've shrugged things off along the way. So always be generous with yourself too and help others.
This is similar to something that we've talked about before, is about the power of community and the power of having the people around you that are going to...
Power of the people.
There's some P words for you that are going to be those plus, minuses, and equals, and the people that are going to support you in those truth moments and be contributing to those truth moments, whether it's success or failure or continuing on the current path. So I want to wrap this up, though, with the 3 things we did with the other book, which was, will you read this again? And who should read this? And then give it your rating.
Cool. Yeah. So would I read it again? Absolutely. I probably need to read this again because every step along the way, ego is going to be the enemy. So it's good. This is going to be one of those that I go back to, like Atomic Habits. I think any book that we are doing on here, I don't think I'll allow it on here if I don't give it a 5 stars. So I definitely give this a 5 star. Who is it good for? And I don't mean it in a bad way. There's probably some books that won't be a 5 star, but definitely I'm going to give this one 5. And that's just how I feel. We just got a 1 star review. Any listener, please leave us a 5 star review here. We just recently got a 1 star. They didn't write anything. It's the same thing with the 2 star. They didn't write anything. They just left a 1 or 2 star review. But I did this book, I give a 5 star review. And who is the book for? Book's definitely for anybody. I think that non-starters, anybody that feels like they have something to learn, ego is the enemy in whatever phase they're in, whatever step along the way.
All right, I'm gonna challenge you a bit with the non-starters, because I think that sometimes we are non-starters and sometimes the ego gets in the way. And so we can have ebbs and flows. I'll speak from my perspective or my experiences. Sometimes I can be riding this almost like a high of like, I'm on the right path and I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And sometimes it is something that knocks the legs out from under you, and not even necessarily something that is even inside of that, say, professional journey. It could be a family member gets sick, you have something happen with your home life. It could be anything, a death in the family, something like that, that then knocks you down. And sometimes you feel like then you're in a spot of being a non-starter. And it can be something coincidentally, or karma, or the universe, or God, whatever you want to call it, that brings a message into your life that gets you back on that path. So I don't know necessarily that somebody who's a non-starter might not hear this. They might hear this, and this could be something that they need to hear.
Well, and if you identify yourself as a non-starter, then this book is definitely for you, because you'll learn that everybody's non-starters at some point too. And everybody's been there. Everybody's done through that. And this book is a good equalizer because everybody has egos. Even the author admits it, that he's got one. And that's why he had to write this book. He experienced a lot of successes early in life too. He's written a lot of good books, but he's the chief marketing officer for American Apparel when he was 21. There's a lot of early successes that could lead us to ego being the enemy, but there could also be a lot of early failures that lead us to ego being the enemy and turn us into non-starters. And it could be our lot in life, the cards that we were dealt. We may think that we're never equipped to get there, but there's definitely people like you that have gotten there, that have gotten past that non-starting point. So look to them as your pluses.
Yeah, love that.
Find some pluses. And you know what? I don't know what the word is, but serendipitous maybe, or whatever, that I call Nick's Tips Plus, the ones with Kenji on there. because we call him Kenji Plus.
That's
We've
true.
called him Kenji Plus for like a year now. Like, we've called him the Godfather. He's like our mentor in a lot of ways. And yet he still needs to be mentored in certain things too. And he's so cognizant of that. So he's a good person that probably doesn't need to read this book, but he's probably already read it. He's probably already lived a lot of this. He definitely does need to read this book too, I'm sure. I think I've already recommended it to him. I think he already may have even gotten it, but he's one that I've seen as my plus in a lot of ways. And that's subconsciously maybe why I put the Nick's Tips Plus. If you see Nick's Tips Plus, that's where Kenji is.
That's funny. I love that.
Yeah. So great. Twyla Plus. Good job. You're riding the same wave here along the way as I was describing it. You basically grabbed the next statement without even reading what I had wrote.
Well, thanks for doing the heavy lifting and reading this one and giving us the abridged version of the bridge.
The bridge. Oh, I love it.
Between atomic habits and our next one, the infinite game.
This is the abridged bridge. Oh, I love it.